Hello and welcome. And what I'd like to talk about today is the difference between an intellectual understanding of the philosophy of yoga and the experiential insight that we can gain from actual practice. So let's dive into the video now. So the reason I wanted to talk about this today is because I'm actually in the middle of giving a 6-week course or a 5-week course on the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. And as many of you will know, yoga is a tradition which is underpinned by an ancient philosophy which goes back a couple of thousand years, if not longer. And what's interesting is that when you look at the teachings of our teacher, Sri Krishnamacharya, he was actually a very, very learned scholar of all of the ancient texts of yoga and many others as well. But at the same time, rather than being a scholar and an intellectual, he was also an enthusiastic, dedicated practitioner of yoga and had been since the age of 3 all the way up until his death when he was 101 years old. So many, many years of practice. And the reason I mention this is because in the world that we live in today, there is a huge amount of focus and emphasis placed on the gaining of intellectual information and knowledge and understanding. And whilst, of course, there is nothing wrong with this in and of itself, and of course, intellectual understanding allows us to a certain degree to interact with the world and to advance in our careers and all sorts of other things. When it comes to yoga, we must be very clear with ourselves about what we want. If our goal is simply to uncover knowledge and information about the Eastern tradition, just so that we can understand it mentally and maybe have conversations with our friends about it and maybe approach it more as a scholastic topic, then of course there is absolutely no problem at all with studying the texts. However, if what we want from yoga, which is of course one of the biggest things, if you like, the most interesting thing that it promises to us, or that it offers us rather, is a transcendence of our suffering, i.e., liberation from our daily suffering, then what we must understand is that pure intellectual knowledge of the text does not help us to transcend that suffering, because all it does is add clutter to a mind that is responsible for already being the source of the suffering in our life. So, as many of you know, the Yoga Sutras talk about the fact that the mind and some of its misunderstanding or miscomprehension of what is going on around us is the main cause of suffering. So, by imbibing intellectual concepts, all we are doing is putting more content into the mind, which doesn't help us to transcend the problems that the mind creates. What helps us to transcend the problems that the mind creates is by having a regular, perhaps we might say a daily yoga practice, which involves on a daily basis bringing ourselves into a state of one-pointed awareness within, whether that be on the body or on the breath or on the mind or other meditative focuses, which is a training for slowly emptying the content of the mind, detaching ourselves from the content of the mind, and bringing ourselves voluntarily into one-pointed focus with a chosen object, all the while trying to move towards cultivating what is called a sattvic, or a peaceful state, so that this becomes the pattern which gradually, through detachment, through focus, through absorption, through energy, through faith, allows us to transcend our suffering. And it is only through going through this path of practice and gradually having deeper and deeper insights, what is called the prajna, the knowledge and insight that comes from absorption and from concentration and practice, that we begin to have realizations that become deeper and deeper as to the reality of our situation, the nature of mind, the nature of thoughts, the nature of our own existence, and our relationship to existence, if you like. It is only practice that brings that insight. As I was saying to someone earlier on today, imagine if you lived in a landlocked country and had never seen the ocean before, and I visited you and you said, please tell me what the ocean is like. And I tried to describe it and tell you the colors and what it feels like. You might gain a vocabulary based understanding of what the ocean is, but you would really be no closer to knowing in your own experience what the ocean is like. It is only when you go and visit the ocean, touch the ocean, taste the ocean, see the ocean, etc., that you truly have an experience of what the ocean is. And this is exactly the same with yoga, friends, which is that it is only through our internal practice and our internal exploration that we begin to understand the nature of what we are, and we begin to understand experientially what it means to be deeply connected to breath, to understand the layers of our body, to understand the sensations in our body, and to get to a place at some point where we can see the mind but not feel that we are the mind. This all comes from practice. Now, if we are practicing, then the text and the philosophy of yoga is profoundly useful in terms of guiding our practice, giving us an understanding of what the ancient seers felt were the goals, as well as the means to achieving the goal of yoga, this stillness and mental equanimity. Then we can use the philosophy and the text of yoga, such as the Yoga Sutra, to guide and shape our practice. But you see, if we don't have the practice, but we're into the philosophy, of course, which there is nothing wrong with, we just can't expect to become deeply knowledgeable on the philosophy without picking up and sustaining practice of the philosophy itself and practice of the limbs of yoga, the movements, the breath, the concentration, the absorption, the meditation, and so on, and expect to make progress towards transcendence. So the message from today's video is that yoga philosophy is a fascinating and deep topic, something that I spend a lot of time studying and talking about. But it is only really with practice that we are able to realize the benefits of what yoga philosophy talks about in our own lives. Then we can use that philosophy to help guide our practice. We can practice with those ideas and concepts as the guide rails for our ongoing journey on this path. So I hope that makes sense. As usual, I hope this has been useful for you, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you. Namaste.